I'm so fast, I've got the pump out before the video even started. I was going to show something. If this thing's leaking, how do you see? There's a hole so that you don't get antifreeze from the impeller side here into your engine oil. That can cause all kinds of rod damage because it gels the oil, blocks oil galleries, and ruin your engine.
Ryan's Mobile One.
This is an aftermarket pump that's about to go in. In the aftermarket pump, you've got the leak here. This is to the back side of the engine. See the drain plug? Drain plugs are always at the bottom. So if we look at this one, this is a factory pump, and there's nothing there. You can look at them side by side. They're the same, but this one has a hole there, this one doesn't. This is the factory one, and it's actually hidden on the back side. You can see the weep marks, the staining, the desert patina, you know, just like a Lake Powell or something. So this thing's been leaking, it's bad, but when it's oriented in there, this is the back of the engine where you can see. It's the aftermarket one. That's a better placement if you ask me. You can actually inspect it better, but this one, it will leak toward the back side of the engine. So you got the transverse mounted engine transmission stuff, it's in there sideways. So you got your transmission blocking you, so you can't really see here. You can see up through the gap, and it'll basically show a leak from this bolt as it runs down here and then drips off. If you're looking underneath, you're going to need a mirror to be able to inspect this if it's the factory pump. But if you see leaking from here, it's a pretty good chance that the seal on the water pump's bad, and it's good that it has a way to get out through this little opening so that it doesn't ruin the rest of the engine and get into here. Looking at the engine compartment, the water pump is located on the back side right here, and it's rigid mounted to the timing cover from the back side, and then there's a rigid pipe that goes from here out to where the thermostat housing is here. Following the upper radiator hose, you can find where that thermostat housing is. I just pull the hose off. You're going to be draining the coolant anyway. The key to this is getting the 3 bolts out from the housing. The back side of the motor is where the actual hole is, where the coolant comes out to where the thermostat is. It kind of peeks around the corner there. Because this water pump is timing gear driven, the timing gear and the timing everything would have to come off the side of the engine, except for there's a shortcut. There's a tool that you can brace against the timing cover and screw into that cam gear to hold it and the chain in place while you poach the water pump from the back side. We'll get a little bit more into that later. After draining the coolant, I go between the engine and the transmission and undo the speed sensor here. Just use a wrench to get that undone. You just use the tip like a screwdriver, and then unretain stuff. I've got these special pliers. I'll leave a link in the description. Makes it way easier. But basically you're just clearing things out. You get the drain plug undone from the water pump, catch a coolant and whatnot from the bottom. It's a 1/2 inch or 13 millimeter. But basically this drains all the coolant from the thermostat, crossover pipe, and water pump and everything. This is how the water pump looked when I pressurized the system. It was dripping from just the other side of it because of the weep hole. But if you back that bolt out and get it to where it's in that sweet spot, so if you back that bolt out to where it's in just the sweet spot, you'll find that the coolant will drain fast enough to get the job done without just creating a splashing flood that drips on you for the rest of the job. True story, the owner of this car was saying, man, this car doesn't have a radiator because there's no radiator cap exposed. You can see the back side of the radiator here. You can pull this down, you can see where the mounts are. But getting to the drain plug on the radiator is a little bit of a pain. It's a good reason why to just pull the drain plug off of the water pump directly, save you some time. Coolant doesn't drip very fast from something for very long unless there's venting. To make that venting happen, make sure to have the radiator cap off. I've got the tester left on, even that's creating some resistance. We're going to pull this off so that we can get into the thermostat housing. This gives us access to that crossover pipe. Just like we're going to pull out the air filter box there, we're going to pull this. We'll disconnect this too. This will help vent it and get it to drain more quickly as well. Next we're going to go in here and I just hit both of them. If I'm not exactly sure which one I'm going to pull from, I just undo them both. I'm not going to bottle feed everybody everything from this. I don't mean to be condescending. These are a little tricky here. The pace of this video I'll pick up here in just a second. I just want to give enough detail to where people can do this if they haven't done it before. So you just got to walk these. These are so subject to getting all kinds of dirt and dust and crud. I don't like the connectors that any of the domestic manufacturers are using. Pretty much have to pick a lock to get anything to unplug. That's ridiculous. You shouldn't have to have a dental tool, but I'll leave one in the description to help you guys. It helps me. I get like nickels, pennies, and dimes for each purchase. Try to help each other out, right? Doesn't cost you anything more. It does help me. That's what I'm trying to say. It's a little odd. This is some lazy throw it together engineering. Here's what I don't like about that. So this is attached to the air filter box, and all I did is wiggle, and if you listen really closely, you can hear the AC leak. If you push on it gently, it stops. It just starts and stops. Basically this union's leaking, the AC compressor's leaking. This poor lady drives it in Arizona. Unfortunately, this union is just garbage, and I walked right into it. So these just pull out. There's no real special trick to them. You just pry them up and out, and then pull it to the back of the car. That frees up your rubber boots. You can wiggle it up and out. This gives you all the access that you need to put the special tool in there. I'll probably lift the motor a little bit with a jack just to give some more room. Of all the times to have the camera not rolling, why should it be the one where I take this little connector off? I was going to take this off figuring there'd be some disconnect or internal bind on these, because I'm less familiar with this kind of garbage connector. To get this undone, and beware, it'll pop open, you put a screwdriver underneath of this and pry up. When you look at these, the barbs are on the downside. And speaking of the downside, this thing was full of so much just slime, you know, like dye and stuff. It's going to take forever to clean up. It's like all over the windshield and everything. On a positive note, I suppose, I've got more room to work. I can reach in there easier. So whatever, it had to come undone anyway. I should have evacuated it first. But look how flat and squared off the O-rings are. So this is just going to be some audio for how the engine sounds before doing the water pump and getting into the timing chain stuff. So there's lots of ways to do this part. You can do it however you want. But I pull the nuts off of this. I get the hose off of here. Make sure you tuck it in such a way you don't forget about it. This is an easy one to forget. Pull the radiator hose off, tuck it up to the side here. Undo the thermostat housing. This is a great time to replace the thermostat. And then this you can just take all as a unit and set it aside by your air filter box and stuff. There's your thermostat. That assembly down there, you just leave your heater hoses connected, and there's just bolts on this back side. One of the bolts that's further back, it's easy to get out. You just use a 3-inch extension, come around the back side and just tag it around there. But then you've got this engine coolant temperature sensor. It's best to just pull it out. It's a 19mm socket. Once you get that out, the other bolt's like right here. There's a conflict between them. Now, of course, I've already cracked this loose by hand. You get a 1-inch extension, and you spin it out the rest of the way. If you want one of these air ratchets, actually it's not an air ratchet, there's no hose at all to worry about. I'll leave a link in the description. I love these things. I thought that they were really wimpy and didn't have applicable use that I'd stay with my air ratchet. I was wrong. So with that out of the way, watch this. There it is. Never underestimate the power of a mirror to reveal where bolts are. There's one there, then there's one more on this that is by the plug here. You can't see it, but it's behind that plug. For a total of 3 bolts on that housing. That third bolt, expect it to be long. 2 short bolts, 1 long bolt together. Once you do that, you're loosey-goosey, and you can pull it back. Pulling it back basically just pulls it out the back of the water pump assembly. And we're loose. That's all you got to do. It's a good idea to check. You've got a gasket here. Make sure that that's clean or good. Replace it if it's needed. Ready to go into the other side and get the water pump out. And when you're looking at the water pump, you can see that there's room for studs. There's 3 of them, 1, 2, 3. These line up with the pulley that's driven by the timing gear. So we will have to take those bolts out. What we'll do is we'll leave one of the bolts in on the water pump. We'll leave everything bolted up to begin with, and pull out 2 bolts, and then put on a specialized tool and tighten it down so that the pulley doesn't move. You can use a jack or a jack stand to support the engine. I'm using a jack stand. Fortunately, the oil pan is aluminum reinforced. Don't support the weight of the car by that. Just the weight of the engine, just enough to tip. Use a block of wood if you need to. These are all 15 millimeter. You'll find the little one's got some Loctite on it and doesn't want to come out too much, but the other two are great, just peachy. Switch to 18 millimeter, pull it off the engine, and that gives you some ability to tip the engine up and get some more access. And also have some room for your wrenches when you're tightening this down to ensure that you don't have any slack. If you have slack or something's loose, if that pulley's not braced properly, then the timing tensioner will give pressure and cause you to have all kinds of headache in terms of like whining because of the belt. Basically, it'll pull too tight. You'll like pull all the stretch and then some out of it, and it'll whine. You get premature wear on the timing chain. We weren't dripping before, but we are now. You can see I've got it tipped up just a little bit. And like I say, that's just to give us some access. This is a little easier to get to than it was before. So looking down in there, you can see it's got threaded holes for the holder. I've got one bolt pointed down. We need to remove that bolt, and then once we've braced it up, we can remove the other bolts. It's just really important that you have it held tight. This is the ideal setup for it, is to just have it with one bolt at the bottom so you can get both of your other bolts into it. I crack mine loose before putting the thing on. Just enough to get the bolt loose, and then I'll pull out the bottom one by hand very carefully with a magnet on deck. You do not want to drop the bolts down in there. And what that looks like is I could do like an extension in a 10, but that's too many pieces. What if the socket falls off? So less is more, just a socket, something that can't fall down the hole. And it's just one piece, nothing can come off. And I just have the magnet. It's just a little telescoping pocket magnet, rare earth magnet. Link in the description if you need one of these. What a valuable tool these are. I don't know who came up with these, who invented that, but kudos to you, buddy. So I have my tool in place. That hole is actually so you can extract the bolt through the hole. I would recommend pulling it before so that you don't have to fish through a hole. That's just my personal preference. And you can see that I don't have anything really to bolt this on by. There's 4 holes and there's just no way to get on it. But don't fear, you can always rotate the engine. I've got those 2 black bolts here and here, nice and secure. Now I want you to imagine breaking those off inside your water pump pulley, and what a fix that would be for you to be in. Fix meaning a problem. Man, you're really in a fix. That context. So we're going to rotate the engine, and by so doing rotate that until at least 2 of those holes line up. You'll find a 21 millimeter wrench handy when you're doing that. So if I go to here, now I'm into those 2 bolts, and I've got the opening close to me for getting the other 2 bolts out. So you just use the cover bolts on this, unless you've been told otherwise. That's what I do. So you can see we've got everything secured. I've got both the bolts in place. I've already pulled out the one so I don't have to fish through the hole. Say 2 out of 3 ain't bad for holding that. I just snug it down. I do not want to break bolts off in there. I just want it to really hold still. Bear that in mind as you tighten it. Now obviously we're in tight quarters, so what I do is I take the socket, I run the thing out, and I have the magnet right next to it like I was showing. And ultimately what happens is it stays in the pulley. And then I take my finger, I hold it against it, reposition my magnet a little bit till I can get 2 fingers on it. I hold my fingers on the underside, and then I bring my magnet around to the front side. Once my magnet's in the front side, I support it from underneath and pull it out this way. This is the safest, best practice that I've found to get these out without risk of dropping them into the timing cover. That would negate the usefulness basically of the tool that we're using. It's a Lyle 13800. I just remember because the GM used to do all those 3800 or 3.8 liter engines, and you need the one tool for, anyway, 13800. Links in the description. So here we are with the tool in place. We don't have a pipe in the back of it. We got a 10 millimeter bolt here. We have another 10 millimeter. You see there's that bolt there, and that one down there just stays put. You don't pull it out all the way out because it hits the... So we're going to pull those out, and then there's one more in the top right corner there that we're going to pull out. And then the last one is just down in that bottom corner. So you got one that's 13 that's hidden there, one that's 10 hidden under here. This one's obvious, and then that one down at the bottom. In order to get the water pump out, you have to pull 4 bolts. You have to pull 2 of these from the back side. You can see that the bottom one I've screwed back in just a little bit. I'm actually going to use that as a driver to push the water pump out so that it goes straight out. So you push on that. About 3 or 4 threads in it is all. So after you've pried it, don't expect it to go all the way because it won't, it'll bind. But just put a little pressure on that, pull the bolt back, and just wiggle it back. Do be careful to catch any coolant so you don't make a mess. And then also, don't let that pulley hit anything. In fact, I'm going to ditch the camera for a minute and just brace that as it comes out. You need to line up the new one to match, the right clock or time. So the way I clock these is I have the drain plug here, and I just pretend like there's an arrow shaft that goes through both of them. That's the way my brain works. Another thing you can do is just line this up to where it's on that bump right there. But castings can vary. They can be a little bit different. So the other thing that you can do is just line it like this. Now if you've got access to the back, and I hope you realize that you do, you can rotate this. It's not easy, but if you stick your finger in the back right there, you can actually move these. A new water pump's going to be stiff. Make sure you feel it, and if it's not stiff, then you probably don't have a seal in it. This is probably not the water pump job to find out that it was manufactured without a seal. I've actually had that happen. But anyway, just get them so that they're clocked the same. Once you do that, throw it in. This marks the end of part 1 of 2. The next one's going to be about putting it back together in part 2.
Bonus footage at the end.
Hickman Arch in Capitol Reef.
I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're part of the experience.
He's like, ooh. It's like a cliff bar around the cliffs.
I saved it just for that. There's an echo.
Did you hear that guy when you said he's part of the experience?
That was a good one.